Now 73 BC is quite a state of emergency for the Republic of Rome. We've already been talking about the Sertorian War in Spain. Then there is a third Servile War that takes place in Italy. And then there is a third Mithridatic War that has taken place in the east. And then if that wasn't enough, there was this huge pirate menace going on in the entire Mediterranean that was cutting off food supply to Italy and not only intercepting the food supply, but disrupting the sea trade routes and the sea lanes all over the empire here, causing the merchants to lose business. And you know, when business isn't good, there has to be something done about it, and the Romans do assign Pompey, when he's done in Spain, to take care of the pirates. Now Rome was up against three very good adversaries, and Rome in turn picked three competent leaders to deal with it. Now Sertorius, the Sertorian War was still going on in Spain, and Pompey was there. Sertorius was killed in 73, so he's over there. The Servile War taking place in Italy was led by a gladiator named Spartacus, and to go on campaign against Spartacus was a magistrate they picked by the name of Marcus Crassus. And then in the east, we've already seen King Mithridates before in two wars. Well, this was the third war he was coming up against Rome, and they sent Licinius Lucullus to handle that. And then for the pirate situation, when Pompey wraps up Spain, they send Pompey to deal with the pirates. We're going to start with the Servile War, but remember, this isn't a video on Spartacus or Rome's adversaries. This is a video on Rome, so we don't go into great detail ever of the adversaries. We're just trying to follow Rome's battle records, their victories and their losses, and their best leaders. Now we're going to start in 73 with the Servile Wars. There was four major engagements in this third Servile War. Now, the Servile Wars refers to slave revolts. The first and the second slave revolt was from 139 to 104, and those happened in Sicily, and they had dragged on. But the most serious was this third revolt led by a gladiator named Spartacus. Now, the gladiators revolted against a private enterprise school at Capua. There were 70 gladiators with knives and utensils that they took from the kitchen, and they broke into the stores and took gladiatorial weapons. Now the Capua military force were sent to put down this rebellion, but were defeated. Then Rome decided to send one legion from Rome under a praetor. Now at this time, it's believed Rome didn't take this too seriously, and that's why they just sent a praetor to take care of it. And this brings us to the first battle. It was the Battle of Mount Vesuvius in 73. Spartacus had went from village to village until he got to Mount Vesuvius, and he camped at the base of Vesuvius, and he attracted and picked up thousands of slaves until he had, they figure, about 50,000 fighting men. Now the praetors were Gaius Gladius Glaber and Publius Varinius, and they were closing in on Spartacus's position. Now Glaber thought he could lay a siege to the rebels at Vesuvius, but Spartacus, Crixus, Cassius, and Onamius led fighters down the back side of the cliff, which was thought impassable to the Romans. But the gladiators had made rope made out of twine, and they scurried down the cliff, and then they outflanked Glaber, and they destroyed the Roman force. Now at this time, Marcus Licinius Crassus, he was elected praetor. Now remember, praetors are there to help the consuls do their job. Remember, the consuls were off fighting other wars. One was in the east, one was in Spain. So the praetors were handling the situation in Italy. Now, Crassus, he headed a 10,000 man force to deal with Spartacus. Now, Crassus had guessed correctly that Spartacus would move north, so he set up a trap to catch him. What he did was he sent his legate, Mummius, south to force the slaves north, where he'd be waiting for them. And he ordered Mummius not to engage. But Mummius had glorious ideas and felt he could defeat Spartacus, and he attacked him, and Spartacus routed his 2 legions. Now, the cohort that was chiefly responsible for this defeat, because they had dropped their weapons and they ran, they were disciplined by Crassus by the use of decimation. And that's where they took 1 out of every 10 soldiers in that cohort. Remember, there's like 480 men in the cohort, and they killed them. The other soldiers either would beat them to death or they would just execute them, but most likely the other soldiers would beat them to death. Now, at this time, the rebels were having their own problems. Remember, even in today's the political situation we got here in America, divided you can do nothing. You have to be united. Well, here the gladiators, they were divided. And if you watch the movies Spartacus, I think it's on Starz series, they really do follow an accurate account of the way this rebellion took place. It's very accurate, and it's a very good series. You gotta watch it, you can. Even the old movie got some things right on Spartacus. You know, it was very dramatized, but there's truth and history in there that they got right. The point is, there was already contention between the leaders of this revolt, and at this point they had different ideas of what actions to take and where to go and how to win their freedom. So what the rebels do, they split up. They split up into 2 forces at this point. One was led by Spartacus and one was led by Crixus. Crixus, he had moved north, and Spartacus moved south. And Crixus, he was basically wanting to teach the Romans a lesson. He would eventually probably want to move north and get out of Italy, but he was going to jack up Rome. Spartacus, he altogether knew better than to take on Rome, and he wanted to just leave Italy, and so he felt their best chance was to get down south and try to get ships, mainly from pirates, because remember the pirate menace was big at this time, and get the heck out of Italy. So they separated. Now at the Battle of Mount Gargano in 72, Crixus led his 30,000 men toward Rome, but he was met by Lucius Gellius, who defeated and killed Crixus. So this force was now wiped out. Now near Mount Gargano, in the next year, Spartacus was leading his 50,000 men toward a port on the boot of Italy, where Sicilian pirates can get him off and take him out of Italy. But the Sicilian pirates broke their deal, and they never showed up to pick up Spartacus and his people. So Crassus now had Spartacus trapped, and in Crassus's own right, he had built a wall and trenches to blockade Spartacus at Rhegium. But on a wild wintry night, Spartacus filled part of their ditch, and then they sallied out. It looked like the slaves might even march on Rome at this point. But at Lucania, some slaves mutinied again under Cassius and Gannicus, who now wanted to move north and escape Italy through the Alps, and so they formed a separate camp. Now Crassus, he saw an opportunity again with the slaves divided, so he divided some of his force, and he sent his quaestor around the north side to Spartacus to keep Spartacus occupied while he took his force and he attacked the camp, and it's reported that he killed some 12,000 gladiators there. Then he pursued Spartacus. Now the problem here is Crassus's quaestor, he was ordered not to engage, but he saw an opportunity and he pursued Spartacus' main army into the mountains, and he was heavily defeated and was himself luckily carried away wounded. But here we are. Discipline in the slave army remained poor, and Spartacus's followers demanded a showdown with Crassus. Instead of playing the smart routes and to keep mobile and operational, they want to sit here and have a decisive battle with the Romans. So Spartacus once again turns his army and moves south. Maybe towards Sicily he was heading, we're not sure. Now, as the Senate's getting a little worried here because they can't seem to trap Spartacus or get him defeated, they start recalling some of the consuls and some of their troops from other portions of their theaters to get into Italy. Now Crassus, he don't like this because this needs to be his conquest and his victory alone if he wants to gain notoriety. And this brings us to the Battle of Sallee in 71 BC. Now Crassus had finally got what he wanted. He had Spartacus trapped and he brought Spartacus to battle. Now Roman armies from Macedonia had landed at Brundisium under Lucullus, while Pompey, who had returned from Spain earlier, he wanted nothing more than to join the fight against Spartacus, and he was on his way south from Rome toward Lucania at the Sallee River. Now Crassus, he started the battle quickly because he wasn't going to wait for these other men to steal his victory, because he wanted to win this battle for himself. But Pompey's army did join this fight against about 5,000 rebels at one section of the battle line. Now, the battle ended with Spartacus being killed in the front lines early on. Pompey was given a lot of credit for ending the slave revolt, which angered Marcus Crassus. At any rate, Crassus crucified 6,000 slaves along the Appian Way. Now, he was certifying his victory that he defeated Spartacus, even though Spartacus' body was never found. But he wanted to cement this victory as his own. So 6,000 gladiators are lying along the Appian Way to give credit to his victory. This ends the gladiatorial war, the Spartacus War, or the Third Servile War, as historians call it. Spartacus, he went 4-1 in this, so a very good record for an adversary. And this moves us into chapter number 7, the Third Mithridatic War. And again, this started in 73. This war lasts for 10 years. Now, what was happening in Asia is King Mithridates wanted to join forces with Bithynia's king Nicomedes III. But Nicomedes was steering his country toward a Roman alliance. So these two kings ended up fighting a series of battles, which Rome was actually backing and supporting Nicomedes. Now, he ends up dying, and the next ruler becomes Nicomedes IV, which was a total Roman puppet. And Rome instigated him to declare war on Pontius, which, that's King Mithridates. That's his country was Pontius, his nation. And this is what started the third war between Rome and Pontius. And this leads us to the Battle of Cyzicus in 73 BC, because after subduing Bithynia, Mithridates decided that Rome, who was beset with strife, it was now or never to launch a campaign, and so he went after Cyzicus and he laid siege to it. Now, a Roman army under Lucullus, he had marched to the relief of Cyzicus, but because Mithridates had a larger force, Lucullus avoided pitched battles, and so a lot of maneuvering was going on, and Lucullus concentrated on hit and run tactics and attacking Mithridates' rear and flanks, and this succeeded in raising the siege at Cyzicus. And gradually the Pontic army was eroded due to Lucullus's tactics here, and Mithridates fled to Tigranes' court in Armenia. So this is a win for Lucullus, raising the siege and forcing Mithridates out of Pontus. Now, Lucullus in 69, he pursued Mithridates and the Armenian army under Tigranes to the city of Tigranocerta, and he besieged the city. Now, Tigranes gathered over 100,000 troops to relieve the city. The Romans had around 10,000, but the disciplined legionaries made easy work of the untrained conscripts. First, Lucullus, he maneuvered to the high ground behind Tigranes and then charged down the hill to disperse the enemy light infantry. Then he fell upon the Asiatic infantry and put them to rout as well. The Roman commander tried to continue his campaign, but his men would not go into the hills to follow the Asians. Now, despite Lucullus's brilliant victories here in the east, he was falling out of grace back in Rome, mainly due to Tullius Cicero's campaign against him. Because remember, he favored Pompey. Pompey was his guy in the military, and Cicero was Pompey's guy in the politics. And so Lucullus would be recalled, and Pompey the Magnus would eventually be sent in his place. Now, Licinius Lucullus finally did receive his triumph, though, in 69 BC. Now, Lucius Licinius Lucullus, he went 4-0 in major battles. A very, very good record. Rome's battle record went to 62 wins, 32 losses, and 2 draws. Now, this brings us to Chapter 8. Under the decline of the Republic, the pirates. And this took place between 79 and 60. Now, it's hard to have a start time concerning pirates since they were always around. But in 79 through 60, they were active and effective enough to force the Romans to plan a campaign against them. Now, as far as the Roman naval arm was concerned, they didn't put much money or resources toward it. The Romans were not prepared to maintain a fleet. Even when they fought against Carthage, they hastily had to construct one, and against Mithridates, neither Sulla nor Fimbria had been given a fleet. Lucullus, he had to buy one or capture him to get his fleet. Now, Rhodes, who had been a great bulwark against pirates and Rome's enemies, but Rome became disappointed with Rhodes' attitude in the last Macedonian War, so spitefully, Rome created a Treni naval center at Delos, which became a free port where any ship could enter and sell or buy goods. Rhodes' sea power declined as a result, for they could not suppress piracy in the Aegean or high seas, and Delos provided pirates with a market to sell their goods and slaves. The legality of such dealings, of course, went overlooked. Now, this brings me to a story I want to tell about Caesar. Now, remember, Caesar's been around. He's younger than Pompey, but he's been around. And he was for the Marian faction in the Civil War. He was related to Marius by relation. So just by that sheer fact, Sulla was against him, and Sulla would have killed him if he could have caught him. But Caesar had fled overseas. Now, while in the east, he fell into the hands of Sicilian pirates who wanted a ransom, like they so often demanded. But unlike so many captives who couldn't pay a ransom and were thrown overboard, Caesar could afford his ransoms. But he often toyed with his captors. He was very charming, he befriended them, and he would tell them if they didn't let him go, he would hunt them down and kill them. Now, when he was released, he did raise a punitive force. He hunted down, captured, and then crucified his captors. So that's Caesar, who we're going to be seeing more about. Now, pirates, they often negotiated on equal terms with nations. They were employed by leaders like Mithridates and Sertorius, and remember Spartacus tried to employ him to get him off of Italy. And in 67 BC, a corn shortage linked problems overseas, which brought piracy to the Senate in Rome. Pompey, now that he was done in Spain, he was given far-reaching powers to deal with this problem by Cicero. Remember, Cicero was Pompey's guy in the Senate. Now, thanks to Mithridates, piratical enterprise had reached a new high level of cohesion and organization. They exacted tribute from maritime cities. They built beacons and watchtowers on many coastlines. They would capture Roman magistrates or Roman generals and ransom them, and so on. Plutarch had said at the time, these pirates had 1,000 ships and controlled 400 cities. So it was a huge force the Romans had to finally deal with. The Senate gave Pompey's command authority over all the Mediterranean Sea and any coast to which it touched 50 miles inland. He was authorized to appoint 24 praetors and to raise 125,000 men and 500 warships. Now, Pompey, he didn't use all his resources, and he didn't use all the time that the Senate allotted to him. He completed his task in just a matter of months. Now, I give Rome and Pompey each a victory for taking care of the pirates. Now, what he did was he put 13 naval squadrons to comb the western Mediterranean, while Pompey himself took 60 of his best ships to the eastern side. Now, the western sea was cleared in 40 days. Within 3 months, the bulk of the pirate bases in the east were stormed and occupied. In the one and only major naval engagement, the pirates were destroyed, with those pirates and their families running inland to fortresses, whereas the Romans tracked them down and captured them. Among the many ships captured, 90 vessels were captured with their equipment. Instead of crucifying the pirates, however, Pompey saw that they were nothing more than a product of the times, desperate men with nothing to lose, and risked crucifixion, which was the penalty of piracy. He offered amnesty to all pirates, and they surrendered in massive waves. He was well deserving of his title, Magnus. This truly was a great conquest achieved virtually on his own. His amnesty was not well accepted by his political opponents, however, in the Senate. Now, this brings us to the time that we were talking about in the Third Mithridatic War. Lucullus had been recalled. Pompey was sent to Asia. Now, just as the Roman forces under Lucullus were spent, and Lucullus called back to Rome, so were the Pontic forces. They were also spent. Both sons of Mithridates and Tigranes established separate states apart from their fathers, which further divided the Pontus and Armenian armies. Pompey used his ships, and he blockaded the coast of Asia from the Bosphorus to Syria, and then he landed his army and he marched north into Armenia. Now, it must be stated that when Pompey was given the power for 3 years to deal with the pirates, it was a tribune pushed the law to give Pompey this power. Now, once again, another tribune, Gaius Manilius, he was campaigning again to give Pompey the complete power in the east to deal with Mithridates. He was allowed to make war and peace to organize the whole Roman East. He was free to plan the consolidation of the eastern provinces and frontier kingdoms. He was allowed to make deals and treaties with foreign nations. He had complete power to deal with the Eastern War here. And this brings us to the Battle of Lycus or Nicopolis in Armenia. Pompey had 50,000 men to Mithridates' 30,000. This was in 66 BC. Pompey the Great, invoking our rule number 2 that we used diplomacy against Tigranes and the Parthians so that the king of Pontus, Mithridates, was isolated. Pompey encountered the Pontic forces, which started to withdraw because of a water shortage. Pompey had moved first, though, because he noticed that the water was scarce, and so he moved around on the high ground and dug wells. Mithridates camped below the Romans, and at night the Romans attacked and annihilated the enemy. The king, however, Mithridates, escaped around the Black Sea. Now, instead of chasing Mithridates, he moved into Armenia against King Tigranes. Tigranes immediately sued for peace, and for 6,000 talents, Pompey set up Tigranes in Armenia as a friend and an ally of Rome. He then moved into the Albania territory, but became involved in guerrilla warfare in the Caucasus. But there was one major engagement at the Battle of Abas. Now, Pompey's army, his figures are unknown. He had a lot of allies. The enemy had 60,000. Now, it is believed that Pompey's army was bigger than that. And what Pompey did at this battle was brilliant. He screened his army using his cavalry force out in front and kept his army hidden more toward the back. And as the enemy force attacked the cavalry started retreating, and the enemy force, seeing this, really took their whole army and rushed in, and the cavalry was able to retreat through the Roman ranks. Then the army jumped up after staying hidden behind whatever obstacles they could, and they engaged the enemy infantry. Now, what Pompey had them do was extend their lines and thin out in the middle, and they allowed their middle to get pushed back while their wings stayed on the flanks and encircled. Basically, it was an envelope that Hannibal did at Cannae. He did the same thing to these Albanians. So a brilliant victory there. He then turned his operations south into Syria and Judea, because Judea was involved in a civil war at this time. Now, Pompey, he was exposed to criticism for neglecting Mithridates. But as it turned out, Mithridates' own son was conspiring against him. So Mithridates committed suicide. This ends the Mithridatic Wars. Now, Pompey, remember, he's in Syria, Judea, and this brings us to the Battle of Jerusalem. In Judea, there was 75 years of Jewish freedom, but it once again was in dispute. War broke out among the members of the ruling Maccabees, the Hasmonean family. The timing was unfortunate for the Jews. The decline of the Egyptian and Syrian monarchies meant there was a political vacuum in Western Asia that Rome was more than happy to rapidly fill. Pompey intervened in the dispute. Actually, he was invited, and he laid siege to Jerusalem. The city held out for 3 years until its surrender. Pompey was to have reportedly killed 100,000 Jews in this siege. Judea came under Roman governorship of Syria. The Roman governorship held over the old Hellenistic monarchies of the Seleucid and Ptolemy empires was now complete. Rome's territory at the time of 60 BC is now this. Pompey is a huge popular figure, famous figure, and Rome's favorite general. Now back on the political scene, the organization of the East remains Pompey's greatest achievement. His sound appreciation of the geographical and political factors involved enabled him to impose an overall settlement that was to form the basis of the defensive frontier system and was to last, with few important changes, for more than 500 years. Pompey's power and prestige were at their height in 62 BC, when he landed at Brundisium back in Italy, and then he dismissed his army. His third triumph trumpeted the grandeur of his achievement. The following decade was the period of his ascendancy in Italy, an ascendancy that was to be eroded through Caesar's growing military power and gradual capture of Pompey's worldwide clientele. Because remember, Pompey had now controls all his people are in the east, they were in Spain, they were in Transalpine Gaul, northern Italy there, and Caesar took over the Transalpine Gaul and northern Italy area from Pompey. Now, Pompey's internal enemies in Rome were the Optimus party, the inner ring of the nobles. It wasn't Crassus or Caesar, who had merely tried to steal the limelight from Pompey's absence and to maneuver into a better positioning for bargaining with their former political ally. The nobles, meanwhile, had gradually reasserted their dominance in Rome and hampered attempts to alleviate the condition of Italy and the Roman populace. But once back in Italy, Pompey avoided siding with popular elements against the Optimates. He was no revolutionary. He wanted all classes to recognize him as first citizens, and he wanted to be the go-to guy for any further campaigns in the Roman Empire. Now, Pompey, he ends up divorcing his wife. I only say this because it was alleged that she was having an affair with Caesar. and he proposed to ally himself by marriage to the party of a young senator leader, Marcus Porcius Cato the Younger. But the nobles were closing their ranks against him, and his offer was rebuffed. Lucullus and others were determined to prevent the en bloc ratification of Pompey's eastern settlement and to reject his demand for land for his veterans. You can see here that the wealthy landowners of the Republic, the senators, they did not want anybody gaining too much power. And Pompey was right there going a little bit too far, and they were trying to curtail his power. So that's the political end right now taking place. We're at 60 BC. This brings us to Chapter 9, Catiline's Conspiracy. This took place between 65 and 63 BC. Now, Catiline's first plot was to overthrow the constitution and seize power in 65. He was caught, but he was not charged because he was well connected. The second plot was again over political disappointment in 63. The plan was to coordinate widespread disturbances throughout Italy, incite chaos, and move in. Does that sound familiar? That's exactly what our political party is doing to us today. But Crassus gave a letter to Cicero, who was the consul at this time, detailing the plan. So the conspirators changed their plan and plotted to kill Cicero instead and to set Rome on fire and cause an uprising among the slaves and have supporters in the south raise an army. But Cicero called out Catiline on the Senate floor, where Catiline was a member, and Catiline fled. Cicero was well informed and found plotters in Rome still. Some envoys of Gallic tribes were in Rome, and their names were given to Cicero as well. The Senate debated on what to do with the 5 leading conspirators. Cicero, who was supported by Cato, ordered execution. The army of supporters now had no hope, and Catiline's army was overwhelmed, and he was killed. Now, the reason we're bringing this up is it's a lot of stories, plays, and stuff have been made of it, but what this did was it showed the vulnerability of Italy, because the Senate, remember, preferred not to keep Roman armies in Italy. They were kept far away from Rome, and so there were not enough legions in Italy to handle wide-ranging conflicts on the peninsula. Now we are going to end this video here. We will start the next video at Chapter 10 on the decline of the Republic with Julius Caesar. Rome's battle record improves to 66 wins, 32 losses, and 2 draws. And remember, we don't count battles where Romans are fighting Romans unless there's a leader we are following because he has, 3 or 4 decisive victories under his belt.